As a matter of now that I'm thinking about Harley Quinn, I should go over and give her a little kiss on the head. I'll wait till later. We're still doing the show.
Okay. Well, several more questions before we get to our big watch-along this week.
Have we mentioned the watch-along?
We have not.
Well, what the fuck's the matter with you? If I got to do everything this is supposed to be your show, and now I'm herding cats around here trying to clean this thing up, we're going to watch the Thrill Seekers, Lance Storm and Chris Jericho versus the Heavenly Bodies from the Smoky Mountain Wrestling Night of Legends, the famous incident where Jericho almost bleeds to death will be our watch along today.
That's right, but we have several more questions before we get there. This next one was sent several times. It says here attempt 6 to CornyDriveThru@gmail.com from Ron Gamble. New rule, if you start putting how many times you sent the question in, your question doesn't get on the air. New rule we're establishing right here. Breaking news. On the
New rules, everybody.
Here's Ron Gamble's question. In January 1984, right after Vince McMahon took over syndicated TV, they had a segment introducing the Von Erich family. If I remember, there was also an article about them in WWF Magazine. Then, after David died, they had a 10-bell salute for him on TV. Obviously, Vince was going hard after the Von Erichs, but they decided to stay in Texas. My question is, what do you think could have happened if one or all of them accepted? Would David have challenged Hulk Hogan for the title? Would any combination of them go after the tag titles? Would they stay faces? Would they turn heel? I await your answer and promise if you do answer this on the air, I will buy something from your website soon.
Well, thank you very much. Is there any concrete evidence? Has this ever been said that Vince ever made them an offer that they turned down in 1984?
What I had heard wasn't that he offered, each Von Erich something.
Right.
But he attempted to make a deal with Fritz.
Right.
Similar to how he attempted to make a deal with Vern. Before Vern laughed him off and Vince just decided to destroy his company.
Well, similar to the type of deal that Stu Hart took.
Yeah, and he made a deal with Mike LaBelle. That also ended up in litigation because Vince stopped paying Mike LaBelle. I mean, there was a track record of Vince making these deals and then reneging on these deals because they didn't fit his agenda any longer. I believe, from what I've researched and been told, Vince tried to make a deal with Fritz. Fritz thought of it as a merger. Vince thought of it as, I want to buy you out.
An acquisition.
Yeah, I want your sons. Look at the kind of wrestlers Vince wanted, especially in 1984. Kerry Von Erich was at the top of the list. The very top of the list.
Well, and see, that's the thing a lot of people don't understand. Also, at the time, the reason why that the Von Erichs had been featured prominently or more prominently than any other outside talent on WWF programming or in the magazine was because that's at the point in time where Vince had just gotten the USA Network and just started All American Wrestling. And I was living in Nashville in 1983, and suddenly I could see WWF wrestling in Nashville. And that was not a good thing because you didn't want really to see any other territories. And if you were working in a territory except for yours on television. As a fan, yes, you did. As somebody in the business, no, you didn't. And Vince was trying to calm down the promoters who were complaining by saying he was going to feature tapes of theirs on national television and make their guys look bigger and feature their stars on his show so it would help the business in general. But it just so happened that all the people that he featured were tapes of people who he eventually ended up getting on his shopping list for putting his expansion together, except for the Von Erichs. And Kerry obviously was the attraction, but more importantly, Vince wanted Dallas, Texas. Vince knew that he could not only run and do business in Dallas, one of the biggest markets, top 10 market in the United States, the television market. What was Dallas at the time? Number 6 or 7 maybe as a television market in the country. Beat New York, Los Angeles, Chicago, and then, it was definitely top 10. Fritz had the TV and the TV stations sewed up. It was like it was like Calgary with Stu. Stu was the one who took it because Calgary, the business at the time, was not as bad as it would be later on in the late 80s, but it wasn't as good as it had been in the glory days. And Stu was getting older, and he thought, well, if I take this $1 million and Brett and Neidhart and Davey Boy and Dynamite get jobs, then I've done well and I can retire. Because Vince knew also that he needed Canada was even different back in those days. That's why he had Carl DeMarco in Toronto have a Canadian office for so long, because there were rules about the content of Canadian television. If it was on TV in Canada, it had to have a certain amount of Canadian content, had to be shot in Canada, or had to have Canadian crew, or had to be affiliated with a Canadian company, or a company that had a branch office in Canada, all this shit. So he's thinking if he gets Stampede, he gets the TV syndication out there, he gets the towns, he gets the talent, and he gets another foothold in Canada at the other end of that country.
And he already started taping TV after he made the deal with the Toronto office. He started taping TV in, I think, Hamilton.
Yeah.
Regularly. Yeah.
So anyway, with Los Angeles, the territory was on its ass and had been. And he just, he made a deal with LaBelle, but then he ended up seeing that, he could have taken that by himself. He didn't need to make a deal. So that ended up in litigation. He couldn't get into Dallas. He could run a show there. It wouldn't fucking draw. And he knew that. And the Von Erichs owned Dallas and their business was booming. So that's why he was trying to buy it, because that way he'd have a top 10 market sewed up. It was the same. He never tried to buy anything in the Carolina territory because it was the same deal. He couldn't get in there and draw a house. The Crockett business was booming, and that was their kind of wrestling. But he wasn't that interested because there were no top 10 TV markets in the Crockett territory in the Carolinas. That's why he underestimated Crockett, because he thought, just this southern shit, in these small towns. He couldn't get in there with a fucking crowbar until Crockett was long gone and WCW had poisoned it. So that's what the courting of the Von Erichs was about, but he never offered them specific jobs and they never turned it down. He knew they wouldn't leave their father, so he was trying to buy the whole fucking company, and they wouldn't sell it, and it wouldn't work. And 5 years later, when they would, he was no longer interested.
He ended up getting Kerry in 1990 after Kerry had been talking to the NWA. Did those talks start when you were on the booking committee, or did they start after you left?
I think probably after I left, but that would have been interesting, but Kerry would have had the same problems Kerry had no matter where he went at that point.